"Don't stop, cowboy," she whispered, as he trapped her against the cabin door in the snowstorm. The wind came down off the bighorns like a thing alive, scouring the last of the autumn grass from the ridges and driving grit into the eyes of anything foolish enough to stand in its path. Elias Thorne sat his dun mare at the lip of the valley and watched the town of Willow Creek stir below him, the way a man watches a snake before he decides whether to step on it or walk around. Smoke rose thin and crooked from the chimneys. A dog barked once, sharp, then thought better of it. The sun was already low, blood-colored behind the peaks, and the first hard flakes of snow rode the gusts like warnings no one in that town would heed. He had not meant to stop here. 3 weeks out of Cheyenne, riding with nothing but the clothes on his back and the weight of old ghosts, he had told himself the next settlement would be the last one he saw before spring. But the mare was lame in the off-fore, and his canteen had gone dry 2 days back. So here he was, dust on his coat and a silence in his chest that had lived there so long he no longer noticed it. Elias nudged the mare forward. The trail dropped between stands of lodgepole pine, and the town rose to meet him. False-fronted stores, a livery with sagging doors, the long, low shape of the Willow Saloon where lantern light already bled onto the boardwalk. He tied the horse at the hitch rail, loosened the cinch, and stood a moment with one hand on the saddle horn, feeling the animal's heat through the leather. Then he stepped inside. The saloon smelled of spilled whiskey, wet wool, and the sour breath of men who had nowhere better to be. A half-dozen of them looked up when the door opened. None spoke. Elias crossed to the bar, laid down 2 bits, and asked for whiskey. The barkeep poured without comment, a man with a face like an old saddle. Elias drank once, slow, letting the burn settle. He did not look for trouble. Trouble, he had learned, usually looked for him first. At the far end of the bar, a man in a starched white shirt was talking low to 2 others. Elias caught fragments: auction, widow, land. He did not lean in. He had no stake in other people's grief. But the name repeated itself once, clear enough to carry: Nora Lang. He finished. The whiskey paid and went out again. The wind had sharpened. Snow stung his cheeks. He led the mare to the livery, paid for grain and a stall, then walked the single street as night came on. Lamplight showed in the windows of the bank, the marshal's office, the small house behind, the laundry where a woman moved back and forth hanging shirts on a line inside. She was tall, dark hair pinned tight, shoulders straight even when no one watched. That was Nora Lang. He knew it without being told. Something in the way she moved said she had already been measured for a grave and decided not to lie down in it yet. Elias turned away. He ate a plate of beans and salt pork at the cafe, paid, and found a corner in the livery loft to sleep. The mare breathed steady below him. He lay on his bedroll with his coat for a pillow and stared at the rafters, until the snow on the roof made a sound like small fingers tapping. He did not dream. He had trained himself not to. Morning brought the auction. They held it in front of the bank, a plank stage thrown together from barn lumber. A crowd had gathered: ranch hands, storekeepers, a few women clutching shawls against the cold. Sheriff Harlan Beckett stood on the stage in a black coat too fine for the territory, silver star catching the weak sun. He was a big man, soft in the belly but hard in the eyes, the kind who had learned that law and money could wear the same boots. Beside him stood Nora Lang. She wore the same plain dress he had seen her in the night before, no coat, hands folded. In front of her, her face was pale but steady. She did not look at the crowd. Beckett cleared his throat. "Folks know why we're here. Thomas Lang died owing the bank on that North Range claim. Widow's got no kin, no way to run the place. Alone. Town council voted to settle the debt by auctioning the land and the widow together. Highest bidder takes both. Fair and square." A murmur went through the men. Elias stood at the back, hat low, arms crossed. He had meant to ride out at first light. The mare was sound again, but his feet had carried him here anyway. Bidding started. Low, a rancher named Coulter offered $200 in gold and a promise to keep her comfortable. Laughter. Another man raised it to $300. Beckett smiled like a man selling cattle. Nora's eyes stayed on the horizon, somewhere past the buttes. Elias felt the old weight shift in his chest. the one he had carried since the night in the Texas Panhandle when he came home to ashes and two small graves. He had not saved them. He had not even been there. The bid climbed to 600. Coulter was grinning now, thumbs hooked in his belt. Beckett looked pleased. Elias heard himself speak before he knew he would. 700. Heads turned. Beckett's smile faltered a fraction. You got that kind of money, stranger? Elias stepped forward. He reached inside his coat and brought out a leather pouch, heavy with what remained of 3 years' wages from trail drives and the sale of a horse he had loved more than most men. He poured the coins onto the plank. Gold and silver winked in the thin light. That's 723. Count it. The crowd went quiet. Nora looked at him for the first time. Her eyes were gray, the color of winter sky just before snow. She did not smile. She did not speak. Beckett counted the coins slowly, lips moving. When he finished, he straightened. Sold, he said, but the word came out flat, like something he had bitten into and found rotten. To the man with no name, Elias Thorne, Elias said. Beckett's eyes narrowed. Well, Mr. Thorne, you got yourself a wife and a ranch. Congratulations. Elias walked up onto the stage. He did not touch her. He simply stood beside her until Beckett handed over the deed, folded small. Nora took it without looking at it. Her fingers were cold when they brushed his. They left the stage together. The crowd parted. No one cheered. Outside the bank, she stopped. The wind whipped her hair across her face. Why? She asked. Her voice was low, steady, the voice of someone who had asked harder questions of herself already. He shrugged one shoulder. Seemed like the thing that needed doing. You don't know me. No. You bought a debt, not a woman. I know that. She studied him a long moment. Snow had begun to fall again, soft now, the kind that meant business. I'm not going to be anyone's wife, she said. Didn't ask you to be. Then what? He looked past her to the mountains. I'll see you clear of this town. After that, you do what you want. She gave a short, bitter laugh that had no humor in it. They'll come after us. I expect so. She nodded once, as if that settled something inside her. My horse is at the livery. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. He watched her walk away, back straight, snow catching in her hair. He felt the old ache stir. Not love, not yet. Something quieter. Recognition, maybe. Two people who had already been broken and were still walking. They rode out of Willow Creek before noon. 2 horses, 1 pack mule he had bought with the last of his coins. Nora rode a sturdy chestnut with a white blaze. She carried a Henry rifle. Across her saddle and a small bundle tied behind. Elias rode behind her, eyes on the back trail. The snow thickened. By the time they reached the first timber, the town was already lost behind white curtains. They did not speak much the first day. The trail climbed into the foothills, switchbacks slick with new ice. At dusk they made camp under an overhang of rock, fire small, coffee bitter. She sat across the flames from him, knees drawn up, staring into the coals. My husband didn't die in no accident, she said after a long while. Beckett's men shot him, wanted the land for Coulter. Thomas wouldn't sell. So they made. It looked like outlaws. Elias turned the coffee pot with a stick. I figured something like that. You still paid. Money's just money. She looked at him across the fire. You got a wife somewhere, Elias Thorne? Had one, long time back. Buried her and the boy both. The wind moved through the pines above them, sighing. She did not offer sympathy. He did not want it. That night he took first watch. She slept wrapped in her blanket, breathing steady. He sat with the rifle across his knees and listened to the snowfall. He thought about the way she had looked at the auction, the way she had not begged. He thought about the graves back in Texas and how the grass had grown over them by now. The ache in his chest felt different tonight, sharper, but not heavier. He did not try to name it. They rode higher the next day. The snow came harder, wind driving it sideways. The horses labored. Twice they had to backtrack around drifts. By late afternoon the light was gone and the world had narrowed to the sound of hooves in snow and their own breathing. They found the cabin just before full dark, an old trapper's place tucked in a stand of spruce, half buried already. The door hung crooked on leather hinges. Inside, the floor was dirt, the stove rusted but whole. A stack of split wood stood against one wall, dry enough to burn. Elias cleared the snow from the roof vent while Nora dragged in the packs. They worked without talking, the way people do when words feel too loud. The fire caught slow, then roared. Heat pushed back the cold. They sat on opposite sides of the small room, eating hardtack and jerky. Outside, the storm howled like something personal. Nora spoke first. "You could have left me there. Most men would. Most men ain't me." She almost smiled. It was the first time. "No, they ain't." He banked the fire. She rolled out her blanket near the stove. He took the far wall. Sleep came hard. The wind rattled the door like a fist. He woke once to find her watching him across the dark. Neither spoke. The silence between them had weight now, the good kind. 3. Days the storm held them. The snow piled against the walls until the windows were blind. They rationed food, melted snow for water, spoke in short sentences about small things, how the mare favored her left 4 still, how the rifle needed cleaning, how the coffee was almost gone. But under the words, something else moved, patient and certain. He saw it in the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching. He felt it in the way his own hand steadied when she passed close. On the 4th night, the wind dropped. The silence was sudden, almost frightening. The fire had burned low. Nora stood and walked to the door, testing the latch. Snow had drifted against it shoulder high outside. She stood there a moment, hand on the wood, back to him. "I used to think if I just held on long enough the world would give me back what it took," she said quietly. "It never does." Elias rose. He crossed the room slow, boots soft on the dirt. He stopped behind her, close enough to feel the heat of her through her coat, close enough that when she turned they were almost touching. "I ain't asking for anything," he said. "I know." Her eyes held his. Snowlight through the single window painted her face silver. She reached up and touched the scar that ran along his jaw, the one he had never explained to anyone. Her fingers were rough from work, warm from the stove. He did not move. She stepped closer. Their bodies met. He felt the length of her against him, solid, alive, trembling, just enough to tell him she was afraid and not afraid at the same time. He lifted one hand, slow, and cupped the back of her neck. She let him. Then she rose on her toes and kissed him. It was not gentle. It was 2 people who had run out of reasons to pretend. He backed her against the door without thinking. Chin the mai. Wood creaking under the weight. Her hand slid under his coat, found skin. He felt the cold iron latch press into her spine, and still she pulled him closer. He broke the kiss long enough to breathe. "Nora, don't stop, cowboy," she whispered, voice raw against his mouth. Her fingers tightened in his shirt. "Please, don't stop." The storm outside had gone quiet, but inside the cabin the only sound was their breathing and the soft crack of the fire. He kissed her again, deeper, and the years of dust and silence and graves fell away like snow from a roof. She made a small sound, half relief, half hunger, and he felt her body yield and claim at the same time. His hands moved under her coat, finding the line of her waist, the heat of her skin. She arched into him, door rattling faintly behind her, as his weight pressed her there. They did not speak again with words. What passed between them needed none. He lifted her just enough that her feet left the floor, and she wrapped her legs around him, trusting the door to hold them both. The cold wood at her back, the heat of him at her front, everything balanced on that thin edge. Her mouth found his throat, his collarbone. He tasted salt and smoke on her skin. When he slid a hand between them, she gasped once, sharp, and then her forehead pressed to his, and she said his name like a prayer. They moved together slow at first, learning the shape of what neither had dared want. The cabin held them, 4 walls, a roof, a world no bigger than the space between their bodies. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and final. Inside, something older than either of them broke open and began to mend. Afterward, they lay on the blankets near the stove, coats and shirts scattered like fallen leaves. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heart. He traced the line of her shoulder with one finger, not speaking. The fire popped. A log settled. "I didn't think I'd ever feel safe again," she said after a long time. "You ain't safe yet," he answered. "But you're not alone." She lifted her head to look at him. "That's more than I had yesterday." He kissed her forehead. The gesture felt clumsy, new. She smiled against his skin. They slept tangled together, the first real sleep either had managed in years. Morning brought the sound of horses. Elias woke first. He eased out from under her, pulled on his pants and coat, took the rifle. He cracked the door. Snow had drifted to the eaves. 4 riders were working their way up the last switchback, black against the white. Beckett in the lead, Coulter beside him, 2 deputies trailing. Their horses labored in the deep snow. He closed the door soft. Nora was already awake, reaching for her Henry. "How many?" she asked. 4. She nodded. No panic. Just the look of a woman who had already buried one husband and decided not to bury herself. "They'll circle," Elias said. "Try to flush us, then we don't let them." They dressed quick, checked loads, divided the last of the jerky. He told her the plan in short sentences: hold the cabin until dark, then slip out the back window and head higher into the trees where the horses could not follow easy. She listened without argument. When he finished, she touched his arm once, brief, the only goodbye either of them needed. The first shots came at mid-morning. A deputy tried to rush the front. Elias dropped him from the window with one clean shot. The body fell backward into the snow and did not move. Beckett's voice carried up the slope, cursing, promising mercy if they surrendered. Neither believed him. They traded shots through the long afternoon. Nora proved a better shot than most. Men Elias had known. She winged Coulter in the shoulder when he tried to flank them from the east. The rancher screamed once and then went quiet. Beckett pulled back to the trees. The deputies kept firing, but the range was long and the snow muffled sound. By dusk, the cabin walls were pocked with bullet holes and the air inside smelled of powder and cold. Dark came early. They waited until the moon was high and the wind had picked up again. Elias went first through the back window, belly crawling through the drift. Nora followed. They moved like ghosts, leading the horses on foot until they were deep in the timber. Behind them, the cabin stood dark and silent. Beckett would find it empty by morning. They climbed through the night, snow to their knees, breath frosting. Twice they heard riders below, but the sound faded. By dawn, they were on the far side of the ridge, looking down into a narrow valley no map had ever named. A thin line of smoke rose from a distant cabin. Someone else's trouble, not theirs. They made camp in a stand of aspen. Elias built a fire small enough to hide. Nora boiled snow for coffee. When it was ready, she handed him the cup and kept her hand on his. A moment longer than needed. "You could still ride away," she said. "Leave me here. No one would blame you." He looked at the mountains, then back at her. "I stopped blaming myself a long time ago. Figured it was time to stop running too." She studied him. The gray in her eyes had softened. "I don't know what this is between us." "Neither do I, but it's real. That's enough for now." She leaned in and kissed him, slow and sure. When she pulled back, she was smiling, the small private smile he was already learning to recognize. They rode on for 3 more days, keeping to the high country. The snow eased. Game was scarce, but they found enough. On the 4th morning, they came down out of the trees into open ground again. Far below, the lights of a different town glimmered. Smaller, no bank, no sheriff with a silver star. Elias reined in. "We could start over there," he said. "Buy a few acres, raise what we can." Nora looked at the lights, then at him. "You'd do that? After everything?" "I would." She reached across and took his hand. Her grip was strong. "Then we do it together." They rode down side by side. The town had a name, Clear Creek, but neither of them cared. What mattered was the space between their horses, the way the silence felt companionable now instead of heavy. Beckett found them 2 weeks later. He rode in alone, horse-lathered, coat torn. He had lost the others somewhere in the passes. The new sheriff, a quiet man named Hayes, met him at the edge of town with a rifle across his saddle. Elias and Nora stood on the porch of the small house they had rented, watching. Beckett's eyes found them. He sat his horse a long moment, face gray with exhaustion and something else. Defeat, maybe, or the first real understanding of what he had become. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. The new sheriff told him to turn around. Beckett did. He rode out without another word. That night Elias and Nora sat by their own stove. The room smelled of pine and fresh bread she had baked. She leaned against him, head on his shoulder. "You think he'll come back?" she asked. "No." "How do you know?" "Because some men only chase what they can take. We ain't that anymore." She was quiet a long time. Then, "I used to dream about the day I'd stop being afraid. Never figured it would feel like this." "Like what?" "Like I could breathe." He kissed the top of her head. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady, covering the tracks they had left behind. Inside, the fire burned warm. Two people who had been sold and broken and lost sat together in the small circle of light, neither of them alone. In the years that followed, folks in Clear Creek would tell stories about the quiet man and the tall woman who had come down out of the snow one winter and stayed. They never spoke much of their past. They didn't need to. The land they worked grew good grass. The house they built had a wide porch where they sat some evenings and watched the mountains turn gold at sunset. Sometimes, when the wind came down from the bighorns carrying the scent of pine and cold, Elias would look at Nora and remember the cabin door, the way she had whispered against his mouth. She would meet his eyes and smile the small, private smile, and neither of them needed words. The world had taken plenty from both of them, but it had given them this one thing back, each other, and they held it the way a man holds a lantern in deep dark, steady, careful, grateful for the light. And when the snow came hard some winters, they would close the door against it and stand together in the warmth, listening to the storm pass. No one ever heard her whisper those words again. She didn't need to. The cowboy had not stopped. He never would.